In the popular imagination, his name is synonymous with evil. We see him in movies and video games as a fiery-haired, fast-talking villain, a cosmic devil scheming to overthrow the heavens. He is the Lord of the dead, the keeper of damned souls, the ultimate antagonist. But what if his entire image is a lie? What if the original stories, the myths told by the ancient Greeks themselves, painted a completely different picture? What if the god of the underworld was not a villain, but a just and solemn king? What if his realm was not a place of eternal torment, but simply the final home for all mortals? What if the most famous crime attributed to him, the abduction of Persephone, was not a simple kidnapping, but one of the most misunderstood and tragic love stories in all of mythology? Today, we are opening the case file on the most maligned of all the gods. We will journey into the depths of the underworld, not to find a devil, but to uncover the truth about its lonely king, Hades. Case file number 1. The King and His Kingdom. To understand Hades, we must first understand the birth of the Greek cosmos and his place within it. Before the Olympian gods, the universe was ruled by the Titans, led by Cronus and Rhea. But Cronus lived in terror of a prophecy that he would be overthrown by his own children. To prevent this, he swallowed each child whole the moment they were born. 5 children, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Poseidon, and Hades, all suffered this fate. Hades, as the eldest son, was the first to be swallowed, the first to know darkness. Only the 6th child, Zeus, was saved by Rhea's trickery. Upon reaching adulthood, Zeus returned and forced his father to regurgitate his siblings. Free at last, the 6 young gods waged a 10-year war against the Titans, a conflict known as the Titanomachy. With the help of the Cyclops and the 100-handed Hecatoncheires, the Olympians were finally victorious. The universe now needed to be divided. The 3 great sons of Cronus drew lots to decide their domains. Zeus, the youngest brother and leader of the rebellion, drew the heavens and became the king of the gods. Poseidon drew the seas, and Hades, the eldest of the 3 brothers, the first consumed and last free, drew the short straw. He was given the vast, unseen realm beneath the earth, the kingdom of the dead, the final destination for the soul of every mortal being, good or bad. This was not a choice, it was the fate assigned. While his brothers ruled over worlds of light, life, and motion, Hades accepted a kingdom defined by silence, shadows, and eternal stillness. His kingdom, also known as Hades, was not the fiery pit of punishment that modern culture imagines. The Greek concept of the afterlife was far more nuanced. Over time, poets described the underworld as divided into regions. When a mortal died, their soul, or psyche, was guided by the god Hermes to the banks of the river Styx, the river of unbreakable oaths. There, the silent ferryman, Charon, would demand a single obol, a small coin, for passage. This is why the ancient Greeks placed a coin in the mouth of the dead before burial. Without payment, a soul could be doomed to wander the banks for 100 years. On the far shore stood the gates of the underworld, guarded by the monstrous 3-headed hound, Cerberus. But Cerberus was not a monster to be feared by the dead. He was a loyal gatekeeper. His purpose was to prevent the living from entering uninvited and, more importantly, to prevent the dead from ever leaving. He was said to be friendly to new arrivals, but savage to any soul who dared to turn back. the vast majority of the dead wander as neutral shades in the asphodel meadows. The truly wicked was sent for eternal punishment in the deep abyss of Tartarus, while the greatest heroes was rewarded in the paradise of the Elysian fields. Presiding over this system of justice was Hades himself, and is a critical distinction that he was not the god of death. That's what a separate deity named Thanatos. Hades was the king of the underworld. His job was not to kill people, but to rule the dead, acting as the solemn warden of a vast, silent population. The ancient Greeks did not worship Hades with love, but they respected him with a profound sense of awe and fear. They rarely spoke his name aloud, fearing that to do so would draw his attention and hasten their own demise. Instead, they used epithets such as Pluton, meaning the rich one, a reference to the precious metals and gems mined from his domain. He was seen as stern, unyielding, and grim, but also incredibly just. His laws were absolute. Unlike his brothers Zeus and Poseidon, who constantly meddle in the affair of mortals, fathering children and starting wars, Hades almost never left his kingdom. He was a recluse, a solitary king whose singular, unbreakable law was the foundation of cosmic order. The dead must stay dead. Case file number 2. A queen for the shadows. The most famous and infamous story about Hades is the abduction of his queen, Persephone. It is often portrayed as a brutal kidnapping, the simple act of a lonely villain. But the original story, as told in the Homeric hymn to Demeter, is a far more complex tale of divine politics, love, tragedy, and the creation of the seasons themselves. Persephone was the daughter of Zeus and Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. She was a being of incredible light and life, the personification of spring. One day, while gathering flowers in a meadow with her nymph companions, the earth suddenly split open. Hades, riding his black chariot drawn by immortal horses, emerged from the chasm and took her away to be his queen. On the surface, this is an act of violence, but the myth adds a crucial detail often omitted in modern retellings. The abduction was done with the permission of Persephone's father, Zeus. Without consulting Demeter, Zeus had secretly promised his beautiful daughter to his brother, perhaps as a way to placate the grim king or to finally bring a queen to the empty throne of the underworld. Hades was not acting as a rogue villain. He was acting on a promise from a king of the gods. This was a divine arranged marriage, albeit one carried out in the most dramatic way possible, a reflection of ancient Greek marriage customs where the bride was often taken from her mother's home without her consent. Demeter was beyond heartbroken. Consumed by grief and fury, she abandoned her divine duties and wandered the earth in disguise, searching for her daughter. As the goddess of the harvest, her sorrow has catastrophic consequences for the world. The earth grew barren, crops failed, and a devastating famine plunged the world into an endless winter. Mortals were starving, and the gods, receiving no sacrifices, grew concerned. Faced with this crisis, Zeus was forced to intervene. He sent Hermes, the messenger god, down to the underworld with a command: Hades must replace Persephone. Here we see the true, law-abiding character of Hades. He did not fight or rage against the decree. He obeyed the command of his king. He told Persephone she could return to her mother. But before she left, he offered her pomegranate seeds to eat. Even a single one was enough to bind her to the underworld forever. This is the most critical moment of the entire story. By eating the food of the underworld, even a single seed, Persephone became bound to it forever. She was no longer just a visitor. She was now intrinsically part of the realm. When she returned to the surface and joyfully reunited with her mother, the truth was revealed. Demeter's joy turned back to despair. Zeus was forced to broker a final compromise. Because she had eaten the seed, Persephone could not remain on Earth permanently. She would spend 2/3 of the year with her mother, allowing the Earth to flourish in spring and summer. But for the final third of the year, the winter months, she would return to the underworld to rule by Hades' side as his rightful queen. Was this a final act of trickery by Hades, or was it something more? Many interpretations, both ancient and modern, see the eating of the pomegranate seeds not as a trick, but as an act of acceptance. In some versions, Persephone willingly eats it, not because she is foolish, but because she has come to understand and accept her role as the powerful, dual-nature queen of the underworld. She is no longer just the maiden of flowers. She is now a formidable deity in her own right, the perfect bridge between life and death, the only god who truly understands both realms. Theirs was not a story of a villain and a victim, but a foundational myth that explained the very cycle of the seasons. Born from a lonely king's desire for a companion and a daughter's destinies to rule two worlds, Hades' realm was rarely bridged, but the few mortal who dared to venture there further illuminate his character. The most famous was the musician Orpheus, whose wife Eurydice died from a snake bite. Devastated, Orpheus journeyed to the underworld, charming Charon and Cerberus with his mournful music. He stood before Hades and Persephone and sang of his love and loss with such sorrow that the unyielding heart of the king of the dead was moved. For the first and only time, Hades bent his own law. He agreed to let Eurydice return to the world of the living, but on one condition: Orpheus must walk ahead and not look back until they both had reached the sunlight. Orpheus agreed, but at the very last moment, just as he stepped into the light, he was overcome with doubt and looked back. He saw only a fleeting glimpse of his wife's shade before she was pulled back into the darkness forever. Hades had kept his word. It was human weakness that sealed Eurydice's fate. This story shows a king capable of profound empathy. In stark contrast was the tale of the hero Theseus and Pirithous, who arrogantly descended to the underworld to kidnap Persephone for Pirithous. Hades, seeing through their foolish plan, feigned hospitality. He invited them to sit and rest on stone chairs. The moment they sat, the chairs grew into their flesh, biting them fast. Hades did not torture them. He simply left them there, trapped by their own arrogance, a punishment that perfectly fit the crime. He was not cruel, but his justice was absolute. Case file number 3. The unjust verdict of history. So, if the original Hades was a just king, a reluctant administrator, a law-abiding brother, and a lonely husband capable of empathy, how did he become a fiery hare, scheming devil we see in modern media? The answer lies in a long, slow process of cultural transformation and misunderstanding. As the ancient Greek world faded, its myth was absorbed and reinterpreted by new cultures, most notably the Romans, and later, the rising Christian world. The Romans identify Hades with their own god Pluto. While Pluto also ruled the dead, he was more prominently known as the god of wealth, of the precious metals and fertile soil that came from beneath the earth. This association softened his image somewhat, shifting the focus from death to riches, but the core of his role remained. The true character assassination began with the rise of Christianity. Over centuries, as Christianity rose, the Greek idea of Hades gradually blurred into the Christian idea of hell, and eventually, Hades himself was conflated with Satan. This wasn't necessarily a malicious act, but a natural evolution as one worldview replaced another. The complex, neutral underworld was simplified into a place of eternal punishment, and its stern king was recast as the ultimate source of evil. This transformation was solidified in the medieval period and through art and literature, like Dante's Inferno, which, while not directly about Hades, helped cement the popular image of a tier punity hell. Modern pop culture, especially films like Disney's 1997 animated feature Hercules, delivered the final blow. For the sake of a simple good versus evil narrative, Hades was completely rewritten. The silent, reclusive, and grim king of the myths was transformed into a fast-talking, sarcastic, hot-headed schemer, a personality that is the polar opposite of his original character. This portrayal, while entertaining, has done more to cement the false image of Hades in the modern consciousness than any other single work. The Hades we know today is not the Hades the Greeks knew. He is a character assassinated by history, a victim of a centuries-long case of mistaken identity. The true king of the underworld was not a devil. He was simply a god who did his job, a god whose defining characteristics was not evil, but a profound, unshakable, and lonely duty. The story of Hades is a powerful reminder that history is often written by the victors. In the battle of religions and cultures, the gods of the old world are frequently recast as the devils of the new one. Hades' reputation became a casualty of a changing cosmology, his name unfairly burdened with the legacy of evil he did not create. His myth challenges us to look past simple labels of good and evil, and to seek the more complex truths that often lie hidden in the shadows. He was not the god of evil, but perhaps the most misunderstood god of them all, a solitary king who rules a silent world, bound by duty and defined not by malice he lacked, but by the justice he upheld. So here is the final thought. What does our modern need to turn Hades into a classic villain say about our own culture? Why are we sometimes uncomfortable with the idea of a neutral, inevitable afterlife, preferring a clear system of reward and eternal punishment? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for joining me in the alley today. Don't forget to subscribe so we can explore more mysteries and legends together. Bye!